Now it's time to find out what happened when Clyde landed in the middle of that stadium with his red and white parachute, getting all the Peruvians excited because that's the color of their national flag, and 40,000 people started jumping out of the bleachers to run down into the field, and the other 60,000 people that are outside the stadium said, we want to be in there too, and they pushed so hard that the stadium walls all collapsed in, and they started running in, and Clyde said, "Oh God, these people are going to crush me." They were coming from every direction. And it's interesting that Clyde, being an expert jump master, his first thought was not for himself. His first thought was, they'll tear holes in my parachute. So as the people were all running towards him from all directions, he was grabbing the parachute as fast as he could and stuffing it into his bag. And then he got going. He started just pushing through the crowd, and the police made a little opening, and he ran out of the stadium. And 100,000 people followed him down through the city streets until he got out to the outskirts of the city where the house was that he was going to be staying for that night. And they all gathered around the house, and the mayor came up and came into the house and said, "Thank you so much. I had no idea it was going to be that crazy. I'm so sorry for that. But this was the best thing we've ever seen. When we saw that red and white parachute against the blue sky, it was just so beautiful. We were all overcome with Peruvian emotion." And then he said, "I wonder, I have already assigned 200 men to rebuild the stadium, and we're going to have the rest of the soccer game tomorrow. But since you're staying overnight, would you jump again?" Clyde said, "All right, so I like to jump, but here's the thing. I'm going to get crushed. If those people were all to just come at me at the same time, I would die." The mayor said, "I will have more men on security. It's going to be okay. And we'll have you come down to the stadium. It's going to be a stronger stadium this time. It'll be all good." Clyde said, "Okay, I guess we'll try it again." So the next morning, Clyde, along with Bob Seamount, his fellow missionary who was another pilot, they took off. The mayor had not announced anything to the people. He didn't want them getting too excited ahead of time. So the people were there watching the rest of the soccer game that had been interrupted. All of a sudden, they heard, here comes the plane overhead, and then boom, out jumps Clyde again, spread eagle coming down. And the people are all looking up at him. Oh! And then when he pulls the parachute, the big red and white parachute opened, and the people all went, oh! And they all started running to the center of the field to be ready for when he landed. And Clyde's coming down going, "I'm not landing in there." So he pulled the controls of the parachute, and he went and he landed outside the stadium. And all the people inside the stadium tried to get out of the stadium at the same time. And they knocked the stadium walls down again. And they all came charging across the field toward him. And this time Clyde said, "Not this time, not this time." He grabbed his parachute, he stuffed it in his pack, and he ran ahead of the 40,000 people all the way back to the airstrip where Bob had just landed. And as he came in, he was making the signal, "Start the engine, start the engine." And he ran up to it, jumped in the plane, and they took off. Woo! "Thank you, God, for protecting me," said Clyde. But that wasn't the only time God protected Clyde. Obviously, Clyde had a lot of adventures, and some of them were from his own making. But sometimes they were legitimate adventures where Clyde was just doing his best to help the mission projects go forward, and God had to help him out. And this is one of those stories. So Bob, who was the other pilot, he went back to the United States after a couple of years. And then he found out that there in the United States, the General Conference was so impressed by what they had been doing with missionary pilots and planes down in South America that they wanted to get some planes going in Africa at the Solusi and Malamulo missions. Has anybody ever heard of those places? You might have had other mission stories, Solusi and Malamulo. And so the General Conference had purchased 2 planes. They had 2 Cessnas. These are small single-engine planes. And then they said, how are we going to get them to Africa? Well, what big ocean is between North America and Africa? Anybody know? What ocean? The Atlantic. Is it a small little ocean, Asher? It's a big ocean. And there's no real stopping points. Once you start crossing over, you got to keep going because there's no place to land if you're having trouble. So they said, well, we'll ship them across. We'll just we'll pack them up and have them taken on a huge container ship across to Africa. And then they got the price. $10,000 per plane to ship it across. Ooh, that's going to be so expensive. Well, Bob, who was a pilot, found out about it. He said, you know what? If you had just me and one other good pilot, we could fly those across, and we'd save you a lot of money because we just have to pay for the fuel to fly across and then for the plane tickets to fly us back. And the General Conference said, do you know another good pilot? What do you think? Did Bob know another good pilot? Yeah, he got on his ham radio and he contacted Clyde Peters all the way down there in the Amazon jungle in Peru. And he said, hey, Clyde, I've got an opportunity to fly 2 Cessnas across the Atlantic Ocean. And Clyde said, when are we leaving? And Bob said, okay, all right, you sure you can go? He said, yeah, I should probably check with Eleanor. So he said, just hang on a second, Bob. He went over to Eleanor. Eleanor, I've got Bob on the radio, and he wants me to go fly a Cessna across the Atlantic Ocean. And her eyes got really wide. Remember, Eleanor, she was glad that Clyde did his work. But she was nervous about planes. She didn't like necessarily be in small planes herself. And to take a small plane across the Atlantic Ocean, she said, well, I guess if you're doing it for God, we're just going to trust that anywhere he leads me, I can safely go. So go ahead. And he got back on the radio. Yes, Bob, we got it. Yes, we're doing it. I'll be flying over to Florida. I'll meet you there in a couple of weeks. So Clyde got ready to go to Florida. Now, I don't know why he decided to take 10 snakes to Florida with him. 10 baby boa constrictors. For some reason, Clyde Peters had 10 baby boa constrictors. The book does not explain why he wanted to take them with him. Well, why he even had them in the first place. Why he wanted to take them to Florida with him. But he packed up 10 baby boa constrictors inside of a cardboard box, and he flew in his small plane over to Lima, Peru, and then he was going to catch a plane from there the next morning to fly to America. And he was awakened in his hotel room at 1 o'clock in the morning by the phone ringing. And he woke up, trying to wake, where's that phone? Yes, hello. Who's calling me at 1 o'clock in the morning? And it was the hotel manager. Senor, your snakes have escaped. How can he know my snakes have escaped? I'm in my room, and the box of snakes is right here next to my bed. Uh-oh. He turned the light on, he looked, and the lid had come off the box, and there were no snakes in the box. So he staggered out into the hallway, and he just followed the sound of the screaming. And he came around a corner, and there were the hotel staff. And they had taken brooms and taped them together so they were about 15 feet long. And they were poking at these little baby snakes in the hall. Trying to get them into a corner or something. And then before they could catch them, a couple of the snakes went under a door to another guest's room. And so they had to knock on the door and wake them up. And they had to yell through the door, let us in, but look out for the snakes. Then there was screaming coming from inside the room. But eventually, Clyde got caught up to them. He said, it's okay, they're just baby boas. And he picked them up by hand to put them in the box. And everybody was like, whoa! But he just handled them and put them back in the box. And he poked some holes in the lid, and he taped it down solid so they couldn't escape anymore, and he went back to sleep. I don't know why he had baby boas. Josiah, why would anybody own 10 baby boa constrictors? Oh, why am I asking Josiah? So he got to America, and he arranged with Clyde Peters, and they got things set, and within about a week, they got ready to fly 2 Cessnas. Now, they were going to take the following route. There's basically 2 ways if you're flying a small plane. The small plane, if you load it up with a lot of extra fuel, you can make it across parts of the Atlantic Ocean that are narrower. The 2 places that it's narrowest is either if you go north, you go up and over to Canada and then Greenland, and then you fly across from there, either stopping in Iceland or you can make it directly to Spain. Or you go south and you fly across the Caribbean, you get down to Brazil, and you go to the part of South America of Brazil that is sticking out into the Atlantic the farthest, and then you fly from there over to Africa, but still a long ways. They were going to go south. So they got their planes ready, all loaded up with 200 pounds of extra fuel in these accessory tanks. They had life rafts in both of the Cessnas. They had a lot of gear. They had VHF radios that could broadcast a long distance so they could stay in contact in case there was ever a problem. They could reach out to other people over the radio. They flew, leaving on a Friday, and they flew all the way down to Trinidad, the little island in the Caribbean. And they spent Sabbath there in Trinidad going to church. And there were 800 church members there. And when they heard what they were going to be doing, the church members said, is there anything we can do, we can pray for you for? They said, well, we're a bit nervous about flying across the Atlantic Ocean. So if you could just pray for that. They said, we will fast and pray. What does it mean to fast? What does it mean to fast? He said it, but you can say it too. To not eat. They said, we're going to spend that whole day when you're crossing the Atlantic, our 800 church members, we will not eat, and we'll just spend all day praying for you. And they said, thank you for that. They flew on down the next day, down into South America, and they finally arrived to the small town of Recife, Brazil, which is on the very eastward tip of Brazil. And they went into the airport office there, and they went up to the official, and they said, yes, I know your office is about to close because it's late in the evening, but we would like for you to please file and stamp off our flight plans because we have to report to you what we're doing. We're flying out of here and we need to let you know where we're going. He said, where are you going? They said, we're flying to Africa. He said, there's no place in Brazil called Africa. They said, no, the continent. He looked at them and said, you cannot fly from Brazil to Africa in a single engine plane. They said, well, we think we can. He said, no, you don't understand. You can't, because I will not let you. I am not signing off on these flight plans. We do not approve for single-engine planes to fly over the Atlantic Ocean. If you go in, then everybody blames us for letting you go. You will not go. I said, come on, please. And they explained to him what the reason was and how they were missionaries. Is there anybody we can call and talk to? Maybe you've got like a boss or something. He said, I'll get a boss, all right. And he got on the phone, and he made some calls, and eventually he said, here, somebody wants to talk to you. And Clyde said, who is it? He said, oh, it's just the commanding general of the Brazilian Air Force. Okay. So, Clyde got on the phone. You're trying to fly 2 planes across the ocean from my country over to Africa? No single-engine planes allowed. I will not allow it. Yes, but sir, No. Click. The official said, he said no, didn't he? Yes. Well, sorry, can't help you. It's the end of the day. I'm locking up. You have to wait outside. I'll see you in the morning, and we'll see what else you want to come up with. But maybe you should consider going the other route. What other route? Oh, fly back to America and then up to Greenland and over to Spain. That's not gonna... We already spent a lot of money flying all the way down here and all the fuel we had to get down here. Going back the other way, we can't afford to do that. That's ridiculous. Are you sure? Nope, I'm not changing my mind. The boss, the general said I can't. We're not doing it. Get out. So they went and they stood outside the building. The man came out and he locked it up. He had a big ring full of different keys for all the hangars on the airport. He locked it up. He said, all right, see you in the morning. And he started walking off. And Clyde sent up a prayer row. God, you brought us this far. If you want these planes to get across the ocean, you got to do something. And the phone inside the building started to ring. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. And the official was already a little ways away. He probably could hear it ringing, but he wasn't going to go back and check on it. He was done working for the day. Clyde called after him, hey, the phone's ringing. And the man called back over his shoulder, someone else will get it. Who? I don't know. The man didn't care. He kept on walking. Ring, 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 ring. The phone is still ringing. You should check it. It might be important. The man stopped walking, and he turned around and started walking back really slowly. He obviously didn't care. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. He got to the door. He pulled out his big ring of keys. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, ring, ring. Oh, come on, Clyde. I thought you know exactly which key you need to get in there. You're just hoping that the phone will stop ringing, and then you can just go back home and not have to worry about us. Ring, 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 ring. Oh, that one opened the door. He opened it up. He came in. There was the desk over there. There was the phone. Ring, 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 ring. He stopped and hung his keys up on the hook. Ring, 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 ring. He took off his coat, put it over on this other hook. Ring, 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 ring. Here's the phone right here. He didn't even answer it then. He walked around the desk. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. All right, if they're ringing that long, it must be important. Yes, hello? Oh, yes, sir. Yes, they're still here. Okay. It's for you. Who do you think it was? The general. Clyde took the phone. Yes? I don't know why I'm even trying this, but you said you have Cessnas. Yeah. Single-engine planes. Yep. We don't allow single-engine planes flying across. I know you did say that. But you said you have VHF radios? Yeah. And life rafts? Yeah. So there's a good chance you'll make it? Well, yeah, we think so. And you're doing this for mission work? Yeah? I'll make an exception. Give me the official. And he handed the phone back, and within 2 minutes, the official had their paper stamped, and he said, all right, well, I guess the commanding general said you can go. Have a good flight. Oh, wow. God had gotten that man, that officer, that general to call back, but he'd also kept them on the phone ringing and ringing and ringing while that man had just tried to lazily get in there and hope that it would hang up. And now they were free to fly. This encouraged them so much because they were nervous about crossing the Atlantic, and now they had proof that God was still watching over them and he was pushing things to go through. So they got out there and they got in their 2 planes. They checked their radios. Bob, can you hear me? Yep. Clyde, I hear you loud and clear. All right, we're ready for takeoff. Now remember, we're really loaded down. We filled up those tanks when we landed here. We filled up every fuel tank to the absolute brim. So we're going to have to go slow to be able to make any kind of height. All right, no problem, Bob. Here we go. They started the engines. They took off. And those planes were loaded down, so heavy with fuel. They took slow. They just barely got off the ground. And they had to go for at least 2 hours before they even able to get up to their cruising altitude of 8,000 feet. And they were going out over the Atlantic now, and Clyde was so used to flying in places like Peru or across the Caribbean where you could look down and there was usually like a little dot, a little island here and there, and now it was just water everywhere. But the skies were clear. It was beautiful. They were flying along, and the first 12 hours were great. They had to stay busy all the time because they had to use a hand pump system that was set up to be able to pump so that fuel from the tanks in the back and underneath the plane would go to the actual engines. So they were pumping a lot. But that kept them busy, kept them awake, and they flew for 12 hours out over the Atlantic. It was now late night, early morning. The moon had just gone down, and all of a sudden they saw that the stars were being blotted out. And here came a huge storm coming towards them. Bob said to Clyde, "Clyde, we're going to have to be careful. These storms over the Atlantic, they cause a lot of drafts. We're going to be probably buffeted around. So let's just try to stay in control as best as we can. Stay in contact when you can." "All right," said Clyde. And the storm hit. And it was like, have you ever been in an automatic car wash? And have you ever been in that part of the car wash where they have the spinny things? Those, they're usually blue, and they kind of slap the car. Blah, 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 blah. That is what it was like. The rain was hitting them so hard, it was just whapping. They couldn't hear themselves think. And Clyde was having to fly mainly by instruments because you could barely see anything. And one time he looked over at his instrument and he said, "Well, okay, our wind speed, we're still managing to do okay there. And wait, altitude what? We were flying at 8,000 feet. This thing says," I'm tapping the screen to see if it'll change. "This thing says 18,000 feet. That can't be right." And then he realized these were the updrafts that Bob had warned him about. There was such strong winds that it was grabbing the planes, and suddenly they would just push them up 10,000 feet higher. Clyde thought, "Well, I'm glad it pushed me up 10,000 feet instead of down 10,000 feet, because then I would be minus 2,000 feet under the water by now." And that's what happened. The plane would go up and it would come down. Sometimes 18,000, sometimes 4,000 feet, up and down. And when it would go up particularly high and the rain was hitting hard, the water would clog up the carburetor. It would clog up the paper filter on the carburetor. And then Clyde would know that this was happening because one simple thing would show it to him. The engine would shut off. And then he would start adjusting the heat to the carburetor, and he'd start cranking, and eventually it would kick on again, and then he'd keep going. 6 times the engine stopped completely. And they were flying in that weather for 6 more hours. 18 hours of nonstop flying. Nobody in a co-pilot seat to take over for you because each of them was flying a separate plane. So now the two of them are just trying to stay awake and survive. But how could they ever fall asleep when they're terrified the whole time and the plane's being pelted and taken up and down and up and down and up and down, and they finally break free of the storm, and there's the coast of Africa. They had made it. Clyde took a breath for the first time in many hours. They landed in Liberia, in the city of Monrovia, Liberia. They had landed in 18 hours, and Clyde later found out that a plane, a 707 jet that had taken off from Recife, Brazil at the same time, heading to the same airport, landed 2 hours after they did. That's how much faster they were going, being jetted along by the storm. And then they got out of their planes after having safely landed, and they looked at the front of their planes. That rain had been hitting them so hard. That rain had been hitting them so hard that it had peeled all the paint off the front-facing parts of the plane. It was just bare metal exposed. And Clyde looked over at Bob and said, "Clyde, we've said this before in our work down in Peru. We have nothing to fear except that we forget how God has led us in our past history. Well, now this flight, this becomes part of our past history. And we know that God led us today, and He led us the day before, and we know that He'll lead us tomorrow." They were able to deliver those 2 planes to the mission stations at Salusi and Malamulo. And when they delivered them, and then they got their plane tickets, and they flew back home, when the dust settled and they were able to figure out how much it had cost, instead of delivering each plane for $10,000 each to be able to ship it across, it had cost for each plane to get there and for the pilots to fly back just $2,500. They'd save $15,000 for the missions by flying these 2 planes so bravely across the Atlantic. This was yet another testimony of God's power and how He took care of missionaries like Clyde Peters and Bob Seamount and many, many others. And He will take care of you wherever your mission work is, whether you're doing mission work in your home or somewhere around the world, whether it's something hugely adventurous and brave, or whether it's something that seems very normal, like just helping a person that you see or talking to someone and encouraging them. God will help you with that. Now, I have great news for you guys. There's no cliffhanger ending today. And you know why that is? Because tomorrow we find out about the cliffhangers since last Saturday. So all you have to do at this point is just go, thank you, Mr. Bacchus.